Fredericton South and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So Bill 47, an act to amend the Coroners Act, does represent a step forward in a number of ways, particularly for the New Brunswick Domestic Violence Review Committee, in terms of increasing its effectiveness. And one of the reasons I said, Mr. Speaker, is because this will enable the committee to make requests for further information from government agencies that they will more readily have to fill. So it kind of increases the authority, the position of authority that the Domestic Violence or Death Review Committee has in accessing information they need to do their work, which is very positive, Mr. Speaker. So I'm glad to see that. Now, and to just put some meat on that bones, information up until now currently related to healthcare and service use, workplace support, income issues, and formal community supports were just often missing from the information they were working from in looking at deaths that have come about as a result of domestic violence. Now, also, I want to note, Mr. Speaker, that there have been improvements too without this bill, actually, which involves incorporating family members into playing a part in the review of women who have been murdered. And that's an important step forward. It didn't need legislative change, but I just wanted to highlight that that is happening because their insights can prove invaluable to the review the Domestic Violence Death Committee does. There are some needs, however, to strengthen the bill, Mr. Speaker, in terms of ensuring greater accountability and tracking of the recommendations arising from the reviews. Recommendations are made, but we often don't see that in a practical way actually resulting in any real positive change to reduce the rate of domestic homicides in our province, which are high in the national context, very high. So it lends some sense of urgency to not only ensuring that the review committee can better do its work and be more effective, but the actual recommendations get acted upon, Mr. Speaker, and that's certainly something that government after government has fallen down on here. And if there's improvements we can make to this bill to ensure that more readily happens, then we should make those improvements. Sometimes perhaps civil public servants have had good intentions to move forward on recommendations, but without their minister fighting for the necessary budgetary resources, they've been unable to. But we don't know. Those are some of the questions we'll be asking about at committee for sure. The other thing is the reporting overall is very slow, Mr. Speaker, so we need to find within perhaps this bill a way of ensuring that there's more, that in fact there's annual reporting to this legislature on the patterns of New Brunswick child deaths and domestic homicides. We're kind of stuck right now with the coroner's office saying, well, we're not going to report on anything until our investigations are finished. Which reminds me a little bit about the situation we're in right now with the deaths of Chantal Moore and Rodney Levi. There's got to be a better way to allow that process to maybe could lead to charges down the road, to remain have the firewall built around it to ensure that any possible court case is not negatively affected, while at the same time providing urgent information to this legislative assembly to enable it on an annual basis to respond in ways that might help alleviate some of the problems we're seeing in terms of the rate of deaths that are unique in New Brunswick based on patterns that perhaps New Brunswick Child Death and New Brunswick Domestic Violence Death Review Committees are seeing, and the coroner is seeing, that could be brought to this legislature. So there's a public reporting component here that needs to be incorporated. The legislation doesn't actually enshrine the practice that exists right now, which is the coroner responding to the recommendations publicly, which the coroner does, but it's not actually provided for in legislation, and if it's not in the law, it doesn't necessarily have to continue to happen. But other measures too, in addition to that, to ensure that the public reporting and public awareness through this legislative assembly is such that we can take urgent action when it's called for, and not have to wait. I think the coroner's report, last coroner's report, annual report we have is maybe 2017, maybe 2016, 2017 is in preparation. That's way too long for this legislative assembly to receive the necessary information it needs to do in order to do its work on behalf of both women and children in this legislative assembly. So those are some of the things, both on the plus side I see with this bill, and on the side where we need to consider improvements. So I'm looking forward to committee to discuss those very issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.